It is difficult to find happiness within oneself, but it is impossible to find it anywhere else. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. The majority of men are not capable of thinking, but only of believing, and are not accessible to reason, but only to authority. A pessimist is an optimist in full possession of the facts. Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. What people commonly call fate is mostly their own stupidity. We seldom think of what we have, but always of what we lack. Therefore, rather than grateful, we are bitter. The safest way of not being very miserable is not to expect to be very happy. Man is the only animal who causes pain to others with no other object than wanting to do so. Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. Thus, the task is not so much to see what no one yet has seen, but to think what nobody yet has thought about that which everybody sees. Mostly it is loss which teaches us about the worth of things. To overcome difficulties is to experience the full delight of existence. We forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial. After your death, you will be what you were before your birth. The person who writes for fools is always sure of a large audience. Man is never happy, but spends his whole life in striving after something which he thinks will make him so. Life is a constant process of dying. The present is the only reality and the only certainty. There is only one inborn error, and that is the notion that we exist in order to be happy. Just remember, once you're over the hill, you begin to pick up speed. Life without pain has no meaning. We can regard our life as a uselessly disturbing episode in the blissful repose of nothingness. Our life is a loan received from death, with sleep as the daily interest on this loan. The greatest of follies is to sacrifice health for any other kind of happiness. To feel envy is human, to savor schadenfreude is devilish. Men are by nature merely indifferent to one another, but women are by nature enemies. Great men are like eagles and build their nest on some lofty solitude. Scoundrels are always sociable. First the truth is ridiculed, then it meets outrage, then it is said to have been obvious all along. Religions are like fireflies, they require darkness in order to shine. The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. Genius and madness have something in common. Both live in a world that is different from that which exists for everyone else. Each day is a little life, every waking and rising a little birth, every fresh morning a little youth, every going to rest and sleep a little death. No rose without a thorn, but many a thorn without a rose. If God made the world, I would not be that God, for the misery of the world would break my heart. Wealth is like sea water. The more we drink, the thirstier we become, and the same is true of fame. The universe is a dream dreamed by a single dreamer, where all the dream characters dream too. Almost all of our sorrows spring out of our relations with other people. A sense of humor is the only divine quality of man. There is something in us that is wiser than our head. You are free to do what you want, but you are not free to want what you want. The shortness of life, so often lamented, may be the best thing about it. If we suspect that a man is lying, we should pretend to believe him, for then he becomes bold and assured, lies more vigorously, and is unmasked. The wise have always said the same things, and fools, who are the majority, have always done just the opposite. The reason domestic pets are so lovable and so helpful to us is because they enjoy, quietly and placidly, the present moment. The world is not a factory and animals are not products for our use. Marrying means to grasp blindfolded into a sack hoping to find out an eel out of an assembly of snakes. One should use common words to say uncommon things. Everybody's friend is nobody's. Life is a business that does not cover the costs. Hatred is an affair of the heart, contempt that of the head. Restlessness is the hallmark of existence. He who does not enjoy solitude will not love freedom. Change alone is eternal, perpetual, immortal. Every satisfaction he attains lays the seeds of some new desire, so that there is no end to the wishes of each individual will. Our first ideas of life are generally taken from fiction rather than fact. A man of genius can hardly be sociable, for what dialogues could indeed be so intelligent and entertaining as his own monologues? It is difficult to keep quiet if you have nothing to do. Religion is the masterpiece of the art of animal training, for it trains people as to how they shall think. The life of every individual is really always a tragedy, but gone through in detail, it has the character of a comedy. Patriotism is the passion of fools and the most foolish of passions. I know of no more beautiful prayer than that which the Hindus of old used in closing, "May all that have life be delivered from suffering." What a man is contributes much more to his happiness than what he has or how he is regarded by others. Life is full of troubles and vexations, that one must either rise above it by means of corrected thoughts, or leave it. Vulgar people take huge delight in the faults and follies of great men. The young should early be trained to bear being left alone, for it is a source of happiness and peace of mind. Intellect is invisible to the man who has none. In their hearts, women think that it is men's business to earn money and theirs to spend it. There is not a grain of dust, not an atom that can become nothing, yet man believes that death is the annihilation of his being. Materialism is the philosophy of the subject who forgets to take account of himself. The highest, most varied and lasting pleasures are those of the mind. Every nation ridicules other nations, and all are right. It is a clear gain to sacrifice pleasure in order to avoid pain. It is a clear gain to sacrifice pleasure in order to avoid pain. It is in the treatment of trifles that a person shows what they are. What people commonly call fate is, as a general rule, nothing but their own stupid and foolish conduct. Wicked thoughts and worthless efforts gradually set their mark on the face, especially the eyes. Universal compassion is the only guarantee of morality. If a man wants to read good books, he must make a point of avoiding bad ones, for life is short and time and energy limited. The two enemies of human happiness are pain and boredom. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. This is the case with many learned persons. They have read themselves stupid. The doctor sees all the weakness of mankind, the lawyer all the wickedness, the theologian all the stupidity. A man must have grown old and lived long in order to see how short life is. A man can surely do what he wills to do, but cannot determine what he wills. Truth that is naked is the most beautiful, and the simpler its expression, the deeper is the impression it makes. Men need some kind of external activity because they are inactive within. Any foolish boy can stamp on a beetle, but all the professors in the world cannot make a beetle. Necessity is the constant scourge of the lower classes, ennui of the higher ones. I constantly saw the false and the bad, and finally the absurd and the senseless, standing in universal admiration and honor. Human life, like all inferior goods, is covered on the outside with a false glitter. What suffers always conceals itself. We seldom speak of what we have, but often of what we lack. I am often surprised by the cleverness, and now and again by the stupidity, of my dog, and I have similar experiences with mankind. Exaggeration of every kind is as essential to journalism as it is to dramatic art, for the object of journalism is to make events go as far as possible. To forgive and forget means to throw away dearly bought experience. Journalists are like dogs. Whenever anything moves, they begin to bark. For our improvement, we need a mirror. Faith is like love. It does not let itself be forced. We deceive and flatter no one by such delicate artifices as we do our own selves. Reading is equivalent to thinking with someone else's head instead of with one's own. A happy life is impossible. The best that a man can attain is a heroic life. Willpower is to the mind like a strong blind man who carries on his shoulders a lame man who can see. All religions promise a reward beyond life, in eternity, for excellences of the will or heart, but none for excellences of the head or understanding. Every parting gives a foretaste of death, every reunion a hint of the resurrection. Life to the great majority is only a constant struggle for mere existence, with the certainty of losing it at last. Compassion is the basis of morality. Life is short and truth works far and lives long. Let us speak the truth. Opinion is like a pendulum and obeys the same law. Men are the devils of the earth, and the animals are its tormented souls. No one can transcend their own individuality. Whatever torch we kindle, and whatever space it may illuminate, our horizon will always remain encircled by the depth of night. In our monogamous part of the world, to marry means to have one's rights and double one's duties. The man never feels the want of what it never occurs to him to ask for. Every generation, no matter how paltry its character, thinks itself much wiser than the one immediately preceding it, let alone those that are more remote. Intellect is a magnitude of intensity, not a magnitude of extensity. Dissimulation is innate in woman, and almost as much a quality of the stupid as of the clever. The bad thing about all religions is that, instead of being able to confess their allegorical nature, they have to conceal it. Noise is the most impertinent of all forms of interruption. It is not only an interruption, but also a disruption of thought. Hope is the confusion of the desire for a thing with its probability. Religion is the metaphysics of the masses. To be alone is the fate of all great minds, a fate deplored at times, but still always chosen as the less grievous of two evils. There is one respect in which beasts show real wisdom, their quiet, placid enjoyment of the present moment. Style is what gives value and currency to thoughts. The difficulty is to try and teach the multitude that something can be true and untrue at the same time. Mankind cannot get on without a certain amount of absurdity. A man can do what he wants, but not want what he wants. Because people have no thoughts to deal in, they deal cards and try and win one another's money. Idiots. What makes people hard-hearted is this, that each man has, or fancies he has, as much as he can bear in his own troubles. There is no more mistaken path to happiness than worldliness, revelry, high life. What now, on the other hand, makes people sociable is their incapacity to endure solitude, and thus themselves. A major difficulty in translation is that a word in one language seldom has a precise equivalent in another one. Every nation criticizes every other one, and they are all correct. Each day is a little life. Console yourself by remembering that the world doesn't deserve your affection. Most men are so thoroughly subjective that nothing really interests them but themselves. Time is that in which all things pass away. The first 40 years of life give us the text, the next 30 supply the commentary on it. If we were not also interested in ourselves, life would be so uninteresting that none of us would be able to endure it. In the sphere of thought, absurdity and perversity remain the masters of the world, and their dominion is suspended only for brief periods. If I maintain my silence about my secret, it is my prisoner. If I let it slip from my tongue, I am its prisoner. If you want to know your true opinion of someone, watch the effect produced in you by the first sight of a letter from him. The eternal being, as it lives in us, also lives in every animal. That which knows all things and is known by none is the subject. I owe what is best in my own development to the impression made by Kant's works, the sacred writings of the Hindus, and Plato. Life is a language in which certain truths are conveyed to us. If we could learn them in some other way, we should not live. To desire immortality for the individual is really the same as wanting to perpetuate an error forever. Everything that happens, happens of necessity. Rudeness is better than any argument. It totally eclipses intellect. The alchemists in their search for gold discovered many other things of greater value. Marrying means doing whatever possible to become repulsed of each other. With people of limited ability, modesty is merely honesty, but with those who possess great talent, it is hypocrisy. A good supply of resignation is of the first importance in providing for the journey of life. Reading is merely a surrogate for thinking for yourself. It means letting someone else direct your thoughts. To call the world God is not to explain it. It is only to enrich our language with a superfluous synonym. In action, a great heart is the chief qualification. In work, a great head. I love looking at famous people because of the way they look, because of the way photography makes them look famous. Human life must be some form of mistake. I believe that when death closes our eyes, we shall awaken to a light, of which our sunlight is but the shadow. Boredom is just the reverse side of fascination. The truth can wait, for it lives a long life. People of wealth and the so-called upper class suffer the most from boredom. A man of business will often deceive you without the slightest scruple, but he will absolutely refuse to commit a theft. The cause of laughter is simply the sudden perception of the incongruity between a concept and the real project. Politeness is to human nature what warmth is to wax. It is with trifles, and when he is off guard, that a man best reveals his character. Ignorance is degrading only when found in company with great riches. The brain may be regarded as a kind of parasite of the organism, a pensioner, as it were, who dwells with the body. For whence did Dante take the materials for his hell, but from this our actual world, and yet he made a very proper hell of it. One can forget everything, only not oneself, one's own being. Money is human happiness in the abstract. Animals hear about death for the first time when they die. For the world is hell, and men are on the one hand the tormented souls, and on the other the devils in it. Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. Martyrdom is the only way a man can become famous without ability. Before you take anything away, you must have something better to put in its place. No one writes anything worth writing unless he writes entirely for the sake of his subject. It is only in the microscope that our life looks so big. Sexual passion is the cause of war and the end of peace, the basis of what is serious, and consequently the concentration of all desire. Honor means that a man is not exceptional. Fame, that he is. Fame is something which must be won. Honor, only something which must not be lost. Friends and acquaintances are the surest passport to fortune. Vengeance taken will often tear the heart and torment the conscience. Apart from man, no being wonders at its own experience. The common man is not concerned about the passage of time. The man of talent is driven by it. It is only in the microscope that our life looks so big. It is an indivisible point, drawn out and magnified by the powerful lenses of time and space. There are 80,000 prostitutes in London alone, and what are they, if not bloody sacrifices on the altar of monogamy? It is not what things are objectively and in themselves, but what they are for us, in our way of looking at them, that makes us happy or the reverse. The man who sees 2 or 3 generations is like one who sits in the conjurer's booth at a fair and sees the same tricks 2 or 3 times. They are meant to be seen only once. It is a curious fact that in bad days we can very vividly recall the good time that is now no more, but that in good days we have only a very cold and imperfect memory of the bad. Reason is feminine in nature. It can only give after it has received. Consciousness is the mere surface of our minds, of which, as of the earth, we do not know the inside, but only the crust. Want and boredom are indeed the twin poles of human life. Physics is unable to stand on its own feet, but needs a metaphysics on which to support itself, whatever fine airs it may assume towards the latter. My body and my will are one. Money alone is absolutely good, because it is not only a concrete satisfaction of one need in particular, it is an abstract satisfaction of all. The tallest oak tree once was an acorn that any pig could have swallowed. Always to see the general and the particular is the very foundation of genius. The fundament upon which all our knowledge and learning rests is the inexplicable. A man who has not enough originality to think out a new title for his book will be much less capable of giving it new contents. It is only a man's own fundamental thoughts that have truth and life in them. Genius is an intellect that has become unfaithful to its destiny. It is only at the first encounter that a face makes its full impression on us. The problem with Germans is that they look in the clouds for what lies at their feet. A man may call to mind the face of his friend, but not his own. Here, then, is an initial difficulty in the way of applying the maxim, know thyself. It is difficult, if not impossible, to define the limit of our reasonable desires in respect of possessions. Talent works for money and fame. The motive which moves genius to productivity is, on the other hand, less easy to determine. There is a wide difference between the original thinker and the merely learned man. In the end everyone stands alone, and the important thing is who it is that stands alone. In the blessings as well as in the ills of life, less depends upon what befalls us than upon the way in which it is met. Solitude will be welcomed or endured or avoided, according as a man's personal value is large or small. Life is a task to be done. It is a fine thing to say defunctus est. It means that the man has done his task. The greatest intellectual capacities are only found in connection with a vehement and passionate will. Suffering by nature or chance never seems so painful as suffering inflicted on us by the arbitrary will of another. There is no doubt that life is given us not to be enjoyed, but to be overcome, to be got over. Mostly the loss teaches us only about the value of things. Every state of welfare, every feeling of satisfaction is negative in its character. That is to say, it consists in freedom from pain, which is the positive element of existence. A man of talent will strive for money and reputation, but the spring that moves genius to the production of its works is not as easy to name. Talent is like the marksman who hits a target which others cannot reach. Genius is like the marksman who hits a target as far as which others cannot even see. Pantheism is only a polite form of atheism. The law of simplicity and naivete applies to all fine art, for it is compatible with what is most sublime. Freedom of the press is to the machinery of the state what the safety valve is to the steam engine. The greatest achievements of the human mind are generally received with distrust. For the purpose of acquiring gain, everything else is pushed aside or thrown overboard. For example, as is philosophy by the professors of philosophy. It is only the hope of what is claimed that begets and nourishes the wish. I've never known any trouble that an hour's reading didn't assuage. All our wanting comes from needs, thus we continuously suffer. The intellect teaches free will, free from suffering. One man is more concerned with the impression he makes on the rest of mankind, another with the impression the rest of mankind makes on him. Life is neither to be wept over nor to be laughed at, but to be understood. Vedas are the most rewarding and the most elevating book which can be possible in the world. Any book which is at all important should be reread immediately. All wanting comes from need, therefore from lack, therefore from suffering. Honor has not to be won, it must only not be lost. No doubt, when modesty was made a virtue, it was a very advantageous thing for the fools, for everybody is expected to speak of himself as if he were one. A genuine work of art can never be false, nor can it be discredited through the lapse of time, for it does not present an opinion, but the thing itself. Knowledge is to a certain extent a second existence. Nothing at all rides on the life or death of the individual. The business of the novelist is not to relate great events, but to make small ones interesting. Unrest is the mark of existence. Obstinacy is the result of the will forcing itself into the place of the intellect. The mother of useful arts is necessity, that of the fine arts is luxury. For father the former has intellect, the latter genius, which itself is a kind of luxury. As a general rule, the longer a man's fame is likely to last, the later it will be in coming, for all excellent products require time for their development. Happiness consists in frequent repetition of pleasure. You must treat a work of art like a great man, stand before it and wait patiently till it deigns to speak. To find out your real opinion of someone, judge the impression you have when you first see a letter from them. History is the long, difficult, and confused dream of mankind. Pride is generally censured and decried, but mainly by those who have nothing to be proud of. Satisfaction consists in freedom from pain, which is the positive element of life. Man shows his character best in trifles. A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial. Night gives a black look to everything, whatever it may be. Ordinary people merely think how they shall spend their time. A man of talent tries to use it. Honor is external conscience, and conscience is inward honor. It is only when a man is alone that he is really free. If there is anything in the world that can really be called a man's property, it is surely that which is the result of his mental activity. Music is the answer to the mystery of life, the most profound of all the arts. It expresses the deepest thoughts of life. It is a clumsy experiment to make, for it involves the destruction of the very consciousness which puts the question and awaits the answer. Music is the melody whose text is the world. Life swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom. The old woman dies, the burden is lifted. Will minus intellect constitutes vulgarity. Thus also every keen pleasure is an error and an illusion, for no attained wish can give lasting satisfaction. A writer should never be brief at the expense of being clear. Reading is a mere makeshift for original thinking. To read a book is to hold an entire world in the palm of your hand. That world is unique to you. No two readers can ever inhabit the same world. You can do what you will, but in any given moment of your life you can will only one definite thing, and absolutely nothing other than that one thing. Where there is no love, a person's faithfulness to the marriage bond is probably against nature. A man becomes a philosopher by reason of a certain perplexity, from which he seeks to free himself. The intellectual attainments of a man who thinks for himself resemble a fine painting, where the light and shade are correct, the tone sustained, the color perfectly harmonized. It is true to life. Every genius is a great child. He gazes out at the world as something strange, a spectacle, and therefore with purely objective interest. The little honesty that exists among authors is discernible in the unconscionable way they misquote from the writings of others. Every original idea is first ridiculed, then vigorously attacked, and finally taken for granted. The man who goes up in a balloon does not feel as if he were ascending. He only sees the earth sinking deeper below him. Pride works from within. It is the direct appreciation of oneself. Vanity is the desire to arrive at this appreciation indirectly, from without. We can do what we wish, but we can only wish what we must. Just as the witticism brings two very different real objects under one concept, the pun brings two different concepts, by the assistance of accident, under one word. Treat a work of art like a prince. Let it speak to you first. Every human perfection is linked to an error which it threatens to turn into. How is it possible that suffering that is neither my own nor of my concern should immediately affect me as though it were my own, and with such force that it moves me to action? Every child is in a way a genius, and every genius is in a way a child. Authority and example lead the world. Writers may be classified as meteors, planets, and fixed stars. The first rule for a good style is to have something to say. In fact, this in itself is almost enough. For, as you know, religions are like glowworms. They shine only when it is dark. The general history of art and literature shows that the highest achievements of the human mind are, as a rule, not favorably received at first. That arithmetic is the basis of all mental activities is proved by the fact that it is the only one that can be accomplished by a machine. Honor means that a man is not exceptional, fame, that he is. Newspapers are the second hand of history. This hand, however, is usually not only of inferior metal to the other hands, it also seldom works properly. The conviction that the world and man is something that had better not have been is of a kind to fill us with indulgence towards one another. That I could clamber to the frozen moon and draw the ladder after me. A word too much always defeats its purpose. It's the niceties that make the difference. Fate gives us the hand, and we play the cards. In many cases, hate a person is rooted in the involuntary estimate of its virtues. There are, first of all, two kinds of authors, those who write for the subject's sake and those who write for writing's sake. The progress of life shows a man the stuff of which he is made. Genuine contempt, on the other hand, is the unsullied conviction of the worthlessness of another. At bottom, every state regards another as a gang of robbers who will fall upon it as soon as there is an opportunity. It is, indeed, only in old age that intellectual men attain their sublime expression, whilst portraits of them in their youth show only the first traces of it. This actual world of what is knowable, in which we are, and which is in us, remains both the material and the limit of our consideration. To expect a man to retain everything that he has ever read is like expecting him to carry about in his body everything that he has ever eaten. In truth, the most striking figure for the relation of the two is that of the strong blind man carrying the sighted lame man on his shoulders. If God made this world, then I would not want to be the God. It is full of misery and distress that it breaks my heart. Do not shorten the morning by getting up late. Look upon it as the quintessence of life, as to a certain extent sacred. Boredom is just the reverse side of fascination. Both depend on being outside rather than inside a situation, and one leads to the other. To free a man from error is to give, not to take away. Knowledge that a thing is false is a truth. Error always does harm. Sooner or later it will bring mischief to the man who harbors it. The principle of contradiction establishes merely the agreement of concepts, but does not itself produce concepts. The less one, as a result of objective or subjective conditions, has to come into contact with people, the better off one is for it. Patriotism, when it wants to make itself felt in the domain of learning, is a dirty fellow who should be thrown out of doors. In reading, the mind is, in fact, only the playground of another's thoughts. Reasonable and vicious are quite consistent with each other. In fact, only through their union are great and far-reaching crimes possible. A reproach can only hurt if it hits the mark. Whoever knows that he does not deserve a reproach can treat it with contempt. Genius is to other gifts what the carbuncle is to the precious stones. It sends forth its own light, whereas other stones only reflect borrowed light. There are 3 stages in the revelation of truth. The first is to be ridiculed, the second is to be resisted, and the third is to be considered self-evident. On the path of actions, great heart is the chief recommendation. On that works, a great head. ... This our world, which is so real, with all its suns and Milky Ways is nothing. Genius gives birth, talent delivers. We should comfort ourselves with the masterpieces of art as with exalted personages stand quietly before them and wait till they speak to us. A man shows his character just in the way in which he deals with trifles, for then he is off his guard. Gaiety alone, as it were, is the hard cash of happiness. Everything else is just a promissory note. If at any moment time stays his hand, it is only when we are delivered over to the miseries of boredom. Every human perfection is allied to a defect into which it threatens to pass, but it is also true that every defect is allied to a perfection. A great affliction of all Philistines is that idealities afford them no entertainment, but to escape from boredom they are always in need of realities. Wealth as well as sea water, the more we drink, the more thirsty, the so famous. Pride works from within. It is the direct appreciation of oneself. Anyone can squash a bug, but all professors of this world couldn't build one. Truth is most beautiful undraped. The word of man is the most durable of all material. It is the courage to make a clean breast of it in the face of every question that makes the philosopher. The world is my representation. To free a person from error is to give, and not to take away. Empirical sciences prosecuted purely for their own sake, and without philosophic tendency, are like a face without eyes. The heavy armor becomes the light dress of childhood. The pain is brief, the joy unending. Motives are causes experienced from within. Not to go to the theater is like making one's toilet without a mirror. To truth only a brief celebration of victory is allowed between the 2 long periods during which it is condemned as paradoxical or disparaged as trivial. A hedge between keeps friendship green. I have described religion as the metaphysics of the people. He who writes carelessly confesses thereby at the very outset that he does not attach much importance to his own thoughts. Newspapers are the second hand of history. Which quote did you like the most? Share your opinion in the comments. Don't miss out on a chance to see the next video. Subscribe.